Liana Ellery hadn't meant to answer the call. She was elbow-deep in a sink full of dishes at the cafe. Her shift was already 3 hours overtime, and her manager had just reminded her she was on thin ice for being late last Tuesday. But when her phone buzzed again with that unknown number, something tugged at her gut. She wiped her hands on a towel and answered it with a breathless, "Hello?" Dead silence for a second. Then a smooth, low voice said, "Is this Marissa?" Liana blinked. No. Sorry. Wrong number." Another pause. Then, instead of hanging up, the man said, "Wait, don't hang up. What's your name?" She laughed, caught off guard. "Why?" "Because you sound like the first real thing I've heard all day," he said, his voice quieter now. "Please. Just your name." She hesitated, glanced around the empty cafe. "Liana." "Liana," he repeated like he was trying it on for size. "I'm Vance." She didn't know why she kept talking. She should have ended the call, gone back to scrubbing plates. But something about his voice, it was calm, steady, like the world didn't rush him. Like he was used to being listened to. "Do you call random numbers often?" she asked. "No," he said. "Today was a weird day." "Same." They talked for 5 minutes. Then 10. Then the cafe lights flickered and she realized her manager had flipped the switch, glaring at her from the front. She blurted out, "I have to go." "Wait," he said. "Will you answer if I call again?" Liana hesitated. Then, before she could stop herself, she said, "Maybe." She hung up. The next day he called again, and she answered. For the next week it became a strange routine. She didn't ask what he did for work, and he didn't ask where she lived. They talked about everything else: music, childhood dreams, their worst days, their favorite smells. He told her he liked the sound of rain on glass. She told him she liked the way old books smelled. He made her laugh. A lot. And then, on Friday, he broke the pattern. "I want to meet you," Vance said. Liana froze in the alley behind the cafe, holding a trash bag in each hand. "What?" "I'm serious," he said. "Let me take you out. Just coffee. You can say no after 5 minutes if I'm weird." She laughed. "You already are weird. But you still answer." She bit her lip. "Fine. One coffee." He gave her an address. She almost didn't go. But on Saturday morning, wearing the only coat she owned that didn't have a tear in it, she stood outside a quiet, upscale cafe in Chelsea, wondering if she was about to get catfished. Then he walked in. Tall, dark hair. Clean cut in a way that said expensive suit, not just nice suit. Sharp jawline, but kind eyes. And the weirdest part? He looked nervous. "Liana?" he asked, walking toward her. She nodded, stunned. "Vance?" He smiled wide and real. "Wow, you're even better in person." The coffee turned into a walk. Then lunch. Then him insisting she let him drive her home, even though she'd taken the train. When he saw her apartment, a narrow walk-up in Queens, he didn't say a word. Just opened her door, helped her carry the leftovers, and asked if he could see her again. She said yes. 3 dates later, she still didn't know what he did for work, but she was falling for him anyway. He sent flowers to the cafe. He showed up at her door with takeout when she was too tired to cook. And when she got sick, he brought her medicine and sat on the floor beside her bed, reading her a book he'd found at a thrift store. But then came the Tuesday night. She finished her shift and stepped outside to find a sleek black car idling at the curb. Vance leaned against it, looking out of place in his tailored coat. "Is that your car?" she asked. He shrugged. "One of them." She blinked. "One of..." He hesitated, then opened the door for her. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." She should have asked more questions. But she trusted him. So she climbed in. They drove in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past. Then they pulled up to a building that made her jaw drop. Glass, gold, and height doormen in suits. A valet waiting like it was normal. "Where are we?" she asked. "My place," he said. She stared at him. "You live here?" He nodded. "I have something to tell you, but I didn't want to do it over the phone." Her heart thudded. He led her up, private elevator, penthouse. Every surface gleamed. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a skyline view that looked like it belonged in a movie. "I'm the CEO of WellerTech," he said, turning to face her. She stared blankly. "What?" "It's a tech firm. We do global systems integration. I built it from the ground up. I'm financially very secure." She laughed a little hysterically. "You think?" He stepped closer. "I didn't want to lead with that. I didn't want you to like me for the wrong reasons." She blinked, heart pounding. "You thought I'd care?" He hesitated. "Most people do. I don't," she said quietly. "I care that you brought me soup when I was sick. That you called just to hear my voice. Not because you live in a skyscraper." Vance exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. "Liana," he said, "I think I'm falling in love with you." She froze. Because she felt it too. But she couldn't say it. Not yet. So instead, she walked toward him and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. And for a long moment, they just stood like that, breathing together. The next morning, Liana woke to the sound of birds outside her window and the memory of Vance's confession still echoing in her chest. She lay still for a long while, staring at the ceiling of her tiny bedroom in Queens, trying to process the impossible shift her life had taken. He was a billionaire. And not just any billionaire, a self-made tech mogul who had built an empire while she was still scraping together rent tips. And yet, he had taken the time to bring her herbal tea when her voice cracked, to remember the name of her cat that had passed away a year ago, to ask her questions no one else bothered asking. She rolled out of bed, her feet touching the cold hardwood floor, and crossed to the mirror. Her reflection looked no different. The same faint scar near her temple, the same eyes that always looked a bit tired. But something inside her had shifted. The world felt bigger now, more dangerous and more thrilling all at once. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She didn't reach for it right away. When she did, she saw his name on the screen. "Hi," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "You're not running?" Vance asked, his tone low and uncertain in a way she hadn't heard before. "Not yet," she said, pulling her cardigan tighter around her. "But I'm not sure what happens next." "Then let me show you," he said. "Tonight. Don't make plans." She hesitated, then nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Okay." That evening, a different car arrived outside her building, sleek, silver, and driven by a man in a navy suit who introduced himself as Elias, Vance's driver. The interior smelled like leather and cedarwood, and she caught the faintest notes of classical music playing over the speakers. Elias didn't speak unless spoken to, and Liana appreciated the quiet. They drove toward Midtown, where the streets grew wider and the buildings taller. She expected another penthouse or ritzy restaurant. What she didn't expect was to pull up in front of a private gallery with tall black doors and a security guard who nodded at her like he'd been briefed. Vance met her at the entrance in a charcoal wool coat. He looked like a magazine spread come to life, but his eyes softened the moment they landed on her. "You're early," he said. "You're the one who sent a car 20 minutes ahead of schedule," she replied, stepping out. He offered his arm. "Come on. I want you to see something." Inside, the gallery was empty. Just the two of them, the hush of the air, and the quiet click of her heels against polished wood. The walls were lined with striking black and white photographs, portraits, landscapes, emotion caught in stillness. She stopped at one, a photograph of an elderly woman holding a child's hand on a cracked sidewalk, their shadows long and distorted behind them. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "I bought the space last year," he said beside her. "I rotate in different artists every quarter. This collection is from an Argentinian photographer who used to be homeless." She turned slowly to face him. "You own this." "I wanted a place to showcase work that might not get seen otherwise," he said, his voice quiet. "Sometimes people just need one person to believe in what they do. One opening." She studied him carefully. "Why are you showing me this?" He looked down at her, serious now. "Because you don't see me the way the world does. And I need that." She felt the air shift. I don't want to be someone you admire, he continued. I want to be someone you trust. Someone you can lean on. I don't need leaning, she replied, but her voice betrayed her. She did. She had for a long time. Vance reached out, gently brushing his fingers against hers. You don't have to need me, but I want you to know I'm here if you ever do. Liana didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the photograph again. The woman's hand held the child's with quiet strength. Not pulling. Just steady. I've never had that, she finally said. Someone who was just there. You do now, he said. They left the gallery and walked the city together, his hand finding hers as naturally as if it had always belonged there. They didn't speak much, just moved through the lights and noise, the air crisp around them, until he hailed a cab and told the driver to wait. Come with me for the weekend, he said as they stood beneath a street lamp. No pressure. Just let me take you away from all this. One night. No phones. No work. Just you and me. She blinked. Where? You'll see. She hesitated, then nodded. Only if I can still come back to work on Monday. He laughed, a low sound that warmed her. Deal. The next morning, they boarded a private jet at a quiet airstrip outside the city. She didn't ask how many planes he owned. She didn't want to know. Not yet. The flight was shorter than she expected. When the doors opened, warm air rushed in and palm trees swayed just beyond the runway. A driver waited beside a black SUV, and within minutes they were winding through a coastal town with white villas and narrow cobbled streets. They arrived at a secluded estate nestled into a cliffside. The view stretched out over the ocean, endless blue meeting sky. Vance led her inside, past open archways and tiled floors, to a terrace where a table had already been set for two. You rented this? She asked. I own it, he replied casually. I come here when I need to breathe. And you brought me here because you make it easier to breathe. They ate beneath a canopy of vines, the breeze brushing through her hair. He poured her wine without asking. Knew when she needed more bread. Listened when she talked about her college art professor who told her she'd never make a living with a sketch pad. You still draw? He asked, leaning back in his chair. Not since I started working double shifts, she said, tracing the rim of her glass. Then start again. She arched a brow. It's not that simple. It could be. She looked at him, really looked. You live in a world where everything is possible. He leaned forward. I live in a world where nothing matters unless the right person is in it. She didn't answer. Couldn't. Later, as the sun dipped behind the waves, he took her to the rooftop where lanterns glowed and cushions were scattered beneath the stars. Music drifted from hidden speakers, soft, slow, and familiar. Dance with me, he said. Here. No one's watching. She let him pull her close. His hand was warm at her waist, his breath near her ear. They moved together slowly, the rest of the world falling away. When the song ended, he didn't let go. I meant it, he whispered. Everything I said. She rested her head against his chest. I'm scared. So am I. They stood like that until the stars brightened overhead. Neither of them said what they both felt not yet. But it was there, thick in the air, waiting. And for once, Liana didn't feel alone. The scent of salt and citrus still clung to Liana's skin when she returned to the city. It had only been 2 days, but the villa's sun-soaked silence made New York feel even louder, more chaotic than usual. The moment she stepped into her apartment, the clatter of pipes and the buzz of the hallway fluorescents greeted her like an old friend she hadn't missed. She dropped her bag onto the couch and stood there for a long moment, staring at the uneven floorboards. Something in her felt different, not gentler or softer but stretched, as if her world had cracked at the edges and light had poured in. The next morning, she opened the cafe door before sunrise. The place still smelled like burnt espresso and bleach. Her manager barely looked up as Liana slipped behind the counter and tied on her apron. You're early, he muttered. She didn't reply. She needed the normalcy, the clatter of mugs, The hiss of the milk frother, the steady rhythm of orders. It grounded her. But by mid-afternoon, the quiet itch in her chest returned. She wiped down the counter for the third time when Mia, the other barista, nudged her. "Guy waiting for you outside," she said, her voice low. "Looks like he stepped out of a fashion ad." Liana's stomach flipped. She walked out into the narrow alley and found Vance leaning against the wall near the dumpster, a paper bag in one hand, his coat collar turned up against the wind. He looked so out of place there, surrounded by cracked concrete and the stench of last night's garbage, but he was smiling at her like she was the only thing that mattered. "I brought you lunch," he said, holding out the bag. "Well, more like late lunch/early dinner. I wasn't sure what you'd eaten today." Liana took the bag, her fingers brushing his. "You didn't have to come here." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to see you in your world for once." She glanced back toward the cafe window where Mia was very obviously pretending not to stare. "This isn't exactly my world. It's just where I am right now." "Then show me the rest," he said. "Later. After your shift." She arched an eyebrow. "You want to ride the train with me?" "I want to know everything," he said. "Even the parts that don't fit in a penthouse." That evening, Liana took him on a walk through her neighborhood. They passed the corner bodega where the owner always gave her an extra banana when she looked exhausted, the mural of jazz musicians someone had painted on the brick wall 2 blocks from her apartment, the stoop she used to sit on with her sketchbook before the rent hike forced most of her neighbors out. Vance listened, really listened, his hands in his pockets, his pace matching hers. He didn't flinch when the train roared overhead, didn't comment on the cracked pavement or the flickering streetlights. He just stayed close. They ended up at her building, and she paused at the bottom step. "You want to come up?" she asked. He nodded once. "If you want me to." Inside, her apartment looked even smaller with him in it. She kicked aside a pile of mail and cleared off the second chair at her tiny kitchen table. He sat, watching her move around the space like she belonged to it and it belonged to her. "You really live here," he murmured, his eyes scanning the shelves crammed with books and chipped mugs. "I really do." She poured him a glass of tap water. "No rooftop infinity pool. No personal chef." "I like it," he said. She leaned against the counter. "You don't have to pretend. I'm not." He stood and crossed the room, stopping just a breath away. "You think I can't see the beauty in this?" She didn't answer. She didn't know how. His hand lifted, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Tell me something you've never told anyone." Liana hesitated, then chose honesty. "Sometimes I dream I'm back in my old art studio. There's paint everywhere and no one telling me to clean it up. It's messy and loud and mine." He nodded slowly. "Then why'd you stop?" "Because life doesn't make room for dreams when you're barely staying afloat." Vance stepped back and pulled something from the inside of his coat. A small, flat box. He handed it to her with no explanation. Inside was a set of sketch pencils in a hand-carved wooden case. They looked old, like they had history. "These belong to my mother," he said. "She was an artist. She never sold a single piece, but our house was covered in her work. She used to tell me that creating something was an act of defiance." Liana looked up, stunned. "You never mentioned her." "She died when I was 22, he said. "I don't talk about it much." She closed the box carefully, her fingers trembling. "I can't take these. I want you to have them," he said. "So you'll remember that what you make matters even if no one else sees it." That night he didn't stay. He kissed her forehead and left quietly, like he knew she needed the silence more than company. The week that followed blurred. Vance was pulled into meetings she didn't ask about, and she worked double shifts to cover for a sick coworker. They texted when they could, short notes that made her smile in the middle of her shift, but they didn't see each other until Friday. She stepped out of the cafe and found a driver waiting again. This time he handed her a note. "You said you've never seen the ocean from the other side of the world. Let me change that." She boarded the plane alone. The flight attendant greeted her by name and handed her a glass of champagne. By the time they landed, it was dark and the air smelled like jasmine. Vance was waiting at the villa. But it wasn't the same one as before. This one was older, tucked into the cliffs of a Greek island, with stone walls and wildflowers climbing the windows. He took her hand and led her through a candlelit courtyard, past an open door, and into a room where canvases lined the walls. Blank ones. A low table in the center held paint, brushes, and the sketch pencils he'd given her. "I rented this villa for the next month," he said. "It's yours. No expectations. No deadlines. Just time." Liana turned in a slow circle, overwhelmed. "You did all this?" "I asked my team to find a place that felt like hers," he said softly. "My mother's studio. This was the closest we could find." She blinked, stunned. "You remembered everything I said." "I don't forget things that matter," he said. She walked to the nearest canvas, ran her hand along the frame. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay. For a while. Or just for tonight." She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm terrified." "Me too." He stepped closer. "But I'm more afraid of walking away from something real." She reached for him. Their hands met between the easels, her fingers curling around his. "I don't know where this ends," she said. "Or what it looks like tomorrow. Then we'll figure it out together," Vance said. "One moment at a time." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the ivy. Inside, surrounded by blank canvases and a man who had given her space to breathe, Liana felt something she hadn't in years, the quiet thrill of beginning again. Liana dipped the brush into the ultramarine blue, dragged it in a slow arc across the canvas, and felt something release in her chest. The villa's windows were cracked open, letting in the hush of distant waves and a breeze thick with honeysuckle. She hadn't picked up a brush in years, not seriously, and yet her hand moved as if it had only ever been waiting for this moment. For 8 days, she painted. Not for anyone. Not even for herself. Just to feel the colors move across the page, to let her thoughts bleed into something wordless. Vance came and went quietly, sometimes lingering in the doorway with a bottle of wine, sometimes leaving notes folded into the pages of the books he'd started leaving around the studio. He didn't hover. He didn't ask what she was working on. He just made sure everything she needed was within reach. On the 9th day, she caught him in the courtyard, standing barefoot on the stone terrace, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, clipped. "No, I don't care what they offered. Tell them the board will have my answer when I give it, not before." She paused in the doorway, brush still in hand, unwilling to interrupt. He ended the call and turned, catching her watching him. "Sorry. Didn't mean to break the silence. You sound different when you're in work mode," she said, stepping outside. "Sharper. Colder. Like you're wearing armor." He studied her for a long moment. "It's how I survived, Liana. I built a company from nothing while everyone waited for me to crack. I had to become someone no one could break." "Does it ever get heavy?" she asked. "Every damn day," he said. "Until I met you." She crossed the courtyard, the hem of her sundress brushing her calves. "You don't have to carry all of it alone." He reached for her hand. "I'm trying to believe that." Later that night, she followed a trail of flickering candles through the villa's garden, unsure what she'd find. Vance had said only one thing before he disappeared earlier: wait for the stars. She found him near the edge of the cliff where the garden opened up into a terrace overlooking the ocean. A low table had been set beneath a canopy of lights strung between olive trees. 2 chairs, a bottle of wine, and a stack of her paintings framed. Her heart stopped. "You hung them." "I didn't want them hidden away," he said. "They deserve to be seen." She stared at the canvas's colors spilling into each other, moments frozen in wild, imperfect strokes. "They're not finished." "Neither are you," he said. "But both are beautiful." They ate slowly, laughter warming the air between them. He asked questions no one else had ever thought to ask. Not just about art, but about the way she saw the world, the way she processed silence, the way she always looked past people's eyes to what they didn't say. She asked him, "What scares you most?" He didn't hesitate. "Being needed for what I can give instead of who I am." She nodded. "You hide it well." "I've had practice." When the stars came out, he stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me. There's no music. There doesn't have to be." She stepped into his arms and they moved slowly, the wind curling around them like a song only they could hear. Her head rested against his chest, and for the first time in a long time she didn't feel like she was bracing for something to go wrong. When he pulled back, his eyes were unreadable. "I have to go to London tomorrow. 3 days. There's an acquisition I can't avoid." Her fingers curled against his shirt. "Do you want me to come?" "I want you to stay," he said. "Keep painting. Let this place hold you until I can." She nodded. "Okay." He kissed her slowly, as if memorizing every breath. 3 days passed. The villa felt quieter without him, but not empty. She painted. She read. She walked the cliffs at dusk and let the air tangle in her hair. On the morning of the 4th day, a courier delivered a package. Inside was a leather-bound sketchbook with her initials pressed in gold and a note. "Put your name on what you create. The world needs to know who made it." She didn't expect him to return that night. But just after midnight, the front door opened and Vance walked in, hair damp from the rain, coat slung over his shoulder like he'd run from the car. "I couldn't wait another second," he said. "I didn't even tell my driver to wait." She crossed the room in 3 steps and threw her arms around him. He held her like he was anchoring himself. In the morning, they sat on the terrace, wrapped in a blanket, coffee steaming between them. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think love was something you earned. That it came after success, after proving yourself. And now, I think love is what makes everything else matter." She turned to him. "What happens when we go back?" "I've already decided," he said. "I'm stepping back from the board. I'll still run the company, but not at the cost of my life." "You're serious?" "I didn't know what I was missing until I had something to lose." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not a gallery darling. I'm not famous. I'm not your mine," he said, his voice firm. "That's all I'll ever need." He stood, reached into his coat pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "I didn't plan this. I didn't buy this ring yesterday or last week. I've had it for months. I kept it in my office drawer like a secret I wasn't ready to say out loud." He opened the box. A simple band. A single stone, soft, oval, and framed in gold. "I want to build a life with you, Liana. One with long mornings, paint-stained fingers, and quiet nights where we fall asleep talking about nothing. I want all of it. The mess, the joy, the uncertainty." "Will you marry me?" She stared at him, the world tipping beneath her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. I want all of it too." He slid the ring on her finger. They stayed in Greece for another week. Not because they needed to, but because they could. And when they returned to New York, it was hand in hand, no more hiding. The gallery where they first met became the venue for their wedding 6 months later. Her paintings lined the walls, raw, honest, unfinished in the way real life always is. No press. No headlines. Just 100 people who mattered, standing beneath strings of golden lights while Liana walked down an aisle covered in wildflowers. Her dress soft and simple, her eyes only on him. Vance stood waiting. No armor, no distance. Just the man who had once called a wrong number and found everything he didn't know he needed. When the vows were spoken, the kiss sealed, and the applause faded, he leaned in and whispered, "Still the best call I ever made." She smiled up at him, her voice steady. "Still the best answer I ever gave." And this time, when they danced, it wasn't in silence. It was to a song written just for them. The first snowfall of the season came softly, blanketing the city in quiet. Liana stood by the window of the gallery, watching flakes drift past the glass as the last guests filtered out from her first solo exhibition. Her fingers clutched the edge of the window frame, paint still caught beneath her nails from the touch-ups she'd done that morning. Behind her, the room had shifted from the buzz of an event to the hush of something sacred. The lights had been dimmed, the music silenced, and the scent of white roses lingered in the air. Vance's hand found her lower back, warm and steady. "They loved your work," he said, his voice low. She didn't turn. "I don't think I've ever felt this exposed." He stepped closer until the heat of him pressed gently against her. "That's what makes it powerful." "I thought I'd feel proud," she murmured. "But it's more like Like I've opened a door and everyone walked in. You didn't just open a door, he said. You built the room. Turning, she looked up at him, her chest tight with something that was not fear anymore, but the weight of finally being seen. I didn't think I'd ever get here. You didn't get here, he said, brushing her cheek with the back of his fingers. You created this. Every brushstroke, every hour you didn't give up, every time you chose to keep going when it would have been easier to quit. She pressed a hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm. I couldn't have done it without you. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. You did it in spite of me. I just stood far enough back to let you shine. She laughed, the sound slipping out before she could stop it. That's not true, and you know it. His mouth curved, not with amusement but with something deeper. Then let me take partial credit. She tilted her head, studying him. How's the new role treating you? Chairman without the day-to-day chaos? His eyes warmed. Best decision I ever made. I finally have time to breathe. To build something that doesn't depend on quarterly numbers. What are you building? He took her hand. Come home and I'll show you. Outside, the city was hushed beneath the snow. Their driver waited at the curb, but instead of taking them to the penthouse or the villa, Vance gave an address Liana didn't recognize. They drove north, away from the skyline, until the buildings thinned and the roads curved into quiet hills dusted in white. When they pulled up to a long drive lined with bare trees, Liana blinked at the sight of the stone house nestled among them. It was elegant but not ostentatious, warm light glowing from the windows, smoke curling from the chimney. Whose place is this? She asked. Vance stepped out and opened her door, his breath visible in the cold. Ours. She froze. What? He tucked her arm through his. I bought it last month. It's not finished yet, still needs furniture. The studio's half done, and the kitchen's a disaster. But it's ours. If you want it. She stared up at the house, her throat tight. Why here? Because we need somewhere that belongs to neither of our pasts, he said. Just our future. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and old stone. The floors creaked slightly under their steps, and light spilled across the rooms in golden pools. There were no paintings on the walls yet, no furniture in the front room. Just echoing space and possibility. He led her to the back, where a glass-walled sunroom overlooked the woods. A large drafting table sat in the center, still wrapped in shipping plastic. I wanted to surprise you, he said. I met with the contractor yesterday. They're converting the East Wing into a full studio. Skylights, storage, a kiln if you ever want to try ceramics. I've never tried ceramics, she whispered. Then it's time. He turned to her, serious now. I don't want a life that's all steel and glass. I want this. Mornings where we wake up to snow. Dinners where we burn the food because neither of us remembered to set a timer. A house we fill with things that matter. Her eyes stung. You're really all in, aren't you? He stepped closer, his voice low. I was all in the day you answered a call that wasn't meant for you. She reached up, fingers threading into his hair. I want this too. He kissed her, slow and certain, and the house around them felt less empty. They moved in 2 weeks later. The days that followed were quiet in the best way. Vance began writing again, not press releases or board memos, but essays, thoughts, ideas he'd buried for years. Liana painted every morning with the windows wide open and music humming low through the house. They cooked together badly. They learned how to argue without retreating, how to apologize without ego, how to laugh at things that once would have broken them. Their wedding had been small, but their life was not. They traveled not just to places with villas and galleries, but to towns with bookstores tucked into alleys and beaches where no one recognized them. She sold her first original piece to a collector in Paris, but she didn't cry until a little girl in Madrid asked her to sign a print. Vance stood proud but quiet through it all. On their first anniversary, he took her back to the villa in Greece. The canvases they'd left behind had been preserved by the caretaker. One wall still bore her fingerprint smudges. I thought we'd repaint it, he said, handing her a brush. They did. Together. A year later, they opened a foundation, one that funded young artists, especially those without resources. The first scholarship recipient was a 19-year-old girl from Queens with a sketchbook full of dreams and nowhere to put them. Liana gave her the same pencils Vance had once given her. "You don't need these to be great," she told the girl, "but they'll remind you that someone believes in what you can do." Time passed, not in a blur but in steady, vibrant pages. Vance learned to slow down. Liana learned to step forward. They built a life from the middle outward, not the top down. And one spring morning, beneath the blooming cherry trees in their backyard, Liana looked up from her easel and called out to him across the grass. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. He looked up from his notebook, brow furrowed. "Miss what?" "The chaos, the city, the empire." He stood, walked over, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Everything I ever wanted is right here." She smiled, leaning into him, and for the first time in either of their lives, everything felt entirely, perfectly still.